We are here today with Dean Chapman. And if you want to start, like I said, just kind of give us some background information about where you were born and year and school.
Born in Lansing, Michigan,
Okay.
1920, June 20th. And I graduated from Lansing High School. I went to Michigan State University. I'll read you my military background. Graduated from MSU in June 1943. Those of us, 120, who were senior ROTC field artillery cadets, have been taken by Boston, Detroit, given physicals and sworn in as enlisted cadre of the United States Army. We were immediately returned to MSU and housed in barracks. None of us were given our second lieutenant bars because the Army saw fit to not send us to summer camp between junior and senior years. This was true of all college ROTC students. The reason is the war was on. Upon receiving our diplomas, we were shipped to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, given 5 weeks of intensive infantry training. Now, we were in field artillery, giving infantry training.
Okay.
July 10th, we were shipped to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and became Class 9-0 or 9-0 at the Field Artillery School. 118 of us graduated December 10th, 1943, received our gold bars, given 10 days leave to go home, say goodbye to loved ones. Next, my orders took me to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where all surplus officers were kept busy doing physical exercise until we were needed as a holding thing. On the bulletin board, I saw an offer to become an artillery officer for the 10th Armored Division at Camp Gordon, Georgia. So I signed up. The following day, I was shipped to Camp Gordon. Upon arrival, they sent me through the Armored School. After a 3 weeks period, I was assigned to the 40th Reserve or Baker Battery, the 423rd Armored Artillery Battalion, of the 10th Armored Division. 5 months later, we embarked for Europe. September 1943, the Chief of Staff of the 10th Armored Division put out an order that each of the 20 divisions, battalions, 20 battalions of our division would send one second lieutenant to be interviewed by him. No explanation was given. We arrived and were interviewed separately. Then we were ordered back to our units. The next day, I received orders to be aide, Commanding General Morris, of the 10th Armored Division. I served in that capacity all during the 10th Armored Division in war in Europe under Patton. And in 1995, I published a book called Growl of the Tiger because of the Tiger Division. In the back of it, I had 3 battle stars. It's a story essentially of our division, not necessarily of me. But at May 8th, 1945, the war ended in Europe. And almost immediately, General Morris was promoted to Corps Commander. He got his 3rd star, so he went to Corps, 6th Corps, which included the 10th Armored, 12th Armored, 45th Infantry Division, and several units that were separate in the south, central, and western part of Bavaria, along the border with Austria. And he took me along as his aide also. In that capacity, he has a rule in the Army that if you are charged with guarding a unit or an area, you are not only obligated, but you have to go currently to inspect it. So at that point, he was the commander of the 6th Corps, and his MPs were guarding the Nazi underground wind tunnel, which was inside of a mountain in Bavaria. Now, I am, at the present time, only one of 2 men still alive who can relate the story about that experience going there. The other one is a German, his name was Arnold L. Rudolph, and he was one of von Braun's scientists that worked under him on rocket research. And so General Morris wanted to know about, see this, how he knew where it was. Went to G2, which is the intelligence branch, found out where it was, ordered the Jeep, and we went to there. And we got there, and the MP officer recognized General Morris right away and saluted him and invited him in. So we went through a little door, turned left, went into the inside of this mountain, which had been hollowed out by slave labor, hand done, 100 of them, 100 men, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week to get it done. Huge rooms, 126 or 30 feet long, right to left that is, 60 feet high and about 95 feet deep. And then, to my knowledge, it's the only wind tunnel in the world that used compressed air instead of big fans. I may be wrong, but that's my knowledge so far. And the Germans had two giant tanks, 50-foot tanks, wind tunnel in between. One to the left, they took all the oxygen there, they pumped the pressure up, air pressure. On the left, or the right, I mean, they reduced it to vacuum, about 8/10 of a pound. And then, I won't give you the whole detail because I have all that written down in a lecture I give. Essentially, von Braun sent somebody outside with a shovel. They brought in 3 models, 10 inches long, model V1, V2, and V3 rockets. So I opened the big glass door, slid it to the left. That exposed the inside of this chamber, and he took the V3 rocket and he fetched on the fulcrum inside the chamber, closed this, slid this glass window back about 4 inches, 2 feet square, hardened glass, and he put big C clamps on to hold it. Then they brought a beam of sunlight from outside by mirrors into the back of that, through a photographic plate, through another window, right over that model so you could see it. And the purpose of the photographic plate was to dim the light so you could look at it, otherwise it'd blind you if you're looking at something. And you could see everything. And so then he pushed a button and the ends of the valves and the ends opened up. Air rushed through, you could see it build up on lines of force, build up around that, just like it was solid, 1/4 inch thick. All of a sudden, after 90 seconds, or a minute and a half roughly, the pressure equalized and it swirled and disappeared. The model was still there, but you read on the control panel the drag, the speed of the air, and so on. And all this was recorded, of course, by von Braun, who stood there. We'd been introduced to him earlier, or he'd been introduced to us, along with these 4 men, including Rudolph. So this is the whole story. But that's after the war. And so this book doesn't cover that because it's all during the war.
Okay.
I'll give you an idea.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you some questions
Sure.
about before you even got into the service? Well, you said you were born in 1920 in Lansing.
Thank you.
What did your parents do?
My dad was the credit manager of the Real Motor Car Company for 20 years, from 1914 to 1934. Then the company got into financial problems through no fault of them. It's kind of a criminal deal. Some guys in New York saw that the real company had $20 million in gold reserves. They decided to get that, so they schemed to kick out the management, which they did, because they didn't make any money in those days. So stockholders were disillusioned, you know, they didn't make any money. So they voted for the other guys. So they took the money and left. The company went belly up. So then Dad went, he also was assistant treasurer at the company at the time. And so then Dad went to Knapp Company, and he was a credit manager there, big store. So there he went to Michigan State University, and became a credit manager there for 12, 15 years to retire.
What about your mom?
Well, neither my dad or mother finished high school. This was years ago.
Okay.
They finished 8th grade, which is all required in those days. They both went to business college. And so they both had the business background. And my dad could probably write the best business letter you ever heard. He could tell people they had to pay their bill and do it in a nice way, and he did it. He was very clever. And nice guy. Well, there's a lot more to that story, but I don't really need that.
You have any brothers or sisters?
I had a brother who was stillborn, so I never knew him.
Okay.
I was the only one in the family, my immediate family. And my dad's parents was a farmer near Leslie, a big farm, very successful. And his uncle, my grandmother's, that's his wife's brother, be his uncle, Dad's uncle, had the big retail hardware store in Leslie. They served all the farming public. And I've been there lots of times with them as a kid. The farmer came in about 300 feet of 1.5 inch rope. You know, they go in the rope and they pull it out 300 feet, cut it off, take it with them. So he did all this kind of thing. Besides, in those old days, the hardware stores were not just hardware, nuts and bolts and nails, but they had chinaware, they had dishes, and they had coffee, you know, all this, everything. Buy anything. It's like almost like a modern store because it had everything except in dry goods.
Okay.
It was very successful. And my family have always been Masons. My dad was a Mason. And so was his great uncle. And we've always been Methodist, which means we try to help people where we can, as we can. And there's a whole story of that during the Depression because I remember that. I remember the day in 1934 when the banks were closed.
Uh-huh.
And I was out mowing lawns for 10 cents an hour in the neighborhood. And I came home, and mother met me in the driveway. I rode my bicycle up. She says, "You got any money?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got 20 cents or what it was I earned that day. Got a couple dollars in the drawer upstairs I'd kept from previous." "Why do you ask?" She said, "Well, Dad just called the shop. They closed the shop down, sent all 2,000 men home. All the banks are closed. No checks are any good. You had money in the bank, you couldn't touch it."
Right.
And so the manager, who was Richard Scott, president of the company, he was a great guy, a good, real good Christian. And he said to Dad, he said, "You're assistant treasurer, go in the vault at the company and see if there's any money there." Because the dealers come in, they pay for cars, leave money and so on. Sometimes it's credit. So. Well, anyway, they had about $2,000 in cash.
Oh.
So the employees in the office, it was like 25 or 30, they all got $15, $20 a piece, that was it.
Uh-huh. They
They all got equally, whether the president of the company or the guy in the front desk, it's the same thing. So that's what Daddy had, came home, $20 in his pocket, plus a couple dollars he had aside. Mother had $5 in the coffee pot. I had $2.20. That's what we lived on. But you couldn't go to the store and buy it unless you had the cash, because the storekeeper couldn't replace his stock. He wouldn't accept checks, his bank wouldn't pay him.
Right.
And if you didn't have cash, you didn't buy anything. And of course, he couldn't replenish his stock unless he had cash, so couldn't even buy gasoline or anything.
So what was it like for you growing that time during the Depression?
Well, the Depression got worse, bad, of course. There's a story that should be told. It's American State Savings Bank in Lansing, one of the several banks. And Richard Scott, the president of the Real Water Company, was the trustee, or not trustee, but a member of the board, I should say, of that bank. And of course, all banks like to have industrialists on their board because then they bring in their wages and, their, the money they pay for wages and so on. It's a current business for them. So he went to the board meeting. Bank was closed. All of them were closed by federal order. And the board treasurer and so on of the bank told him, "Well, now if we do this, we can get maybe 20% of this loan and 10% of that. Can't get any on this thing, so they're $100,000 short of the required backing for the number of dollars in deposits. They had depositors in it. They had so much money to back it up because they came out to money to get it. But they have enough money, they're 100,000 short. So Richard Scott sat to the back of the room, he looked around and said, "Well, I'll personally guarantee the $100,000. I don't have to, but I want to do that because I know people that have money, a little money, like my mother's mother. She had $300. She was crippled, a war widow from Civil War. So that's all the money she had. He knew that, so he said, "I'm going to see if these people are protected." So he went home. He sat down with his wife. He said, "Now I want to talk to you." He told her what he did. He said, "We're going to have to sell all our bonds and our second car and take the 2 gals we hire for cooking and cleaning and so on. And we just keep one person on the staff, our whole personal staff. That's the driver of the car, who also is a gardener." He had a garden, big, beautiful home. So they did. They took the paintings off the wall, the stocks they had, everything they owned. Next week they had a meeting at the bank, and he went in and he said, "Well, how'd you make out?" "Well, they were still $100,000 short." He said, "Pocket pulled $100,000 cash, and later, there it is." He opened the bank. In 10 days, he opened the bank. You know when the bank opened up?
Yeah.
Oh, no, for months. All because he had to get him up there. So he's a real hero.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of background I had growing up. with people like that. Richard Scott and his wife belonged to the same Sunday school class my parents did, the same church. And we had in that same Sunday school class, there to be a car who was wasn't the head of the state Supreme Court, but was a member of it. And his wife and his daughter Clarice, in high school with me. I mean, all these kind of people I was around them. And they were kind of people that did the right thing for the right reason. And so that's the kind of background I have.
I mean, you continued to go to school during the Depression, and did you keep
Yeah.
doing the lawn thing, or people
Where
could
I
afford
could.
that anymore?
Well, I finally went to work for the grocery store at 10 cents an hour.
Okay.
I worked my way through Michigan State University, 10 cents an hour. Working Sundays, weekends, and nights.
So did you graduate in 1938, 37?
Well, 43 from college.
Oh,
June
but from
5th.
high school.
Oh, 39.
Okay, and then when
It
you
was
were...
January 39.
Okay. Did you do any of the ROTC when you were in high school?
Didn't have it then.
Okay.
Only in college.
When you were in high school, did you know anything about what might be going on in Europe? Or...
Well, you had the radio, sure. We had a history class, and the teacher had a radio because she was one of these people, Miss Millar was one of these people that traveled all over the world in summer, conducted tours. This is way before tours were common. And so she would turn the radio on, and when Hitler was talking, he'd get it direct, you know, and she'd interpret it because she knew German and tell what he said. So we were very conscious of what was going on.
Could you imagine at that time that it would have gotten as big as it did, or did you just think that there's a
We were
small
afraid it
problem?
would be.
Yeah. Okay.
And of course, when they went into Poland, England and France declared war against them, then we knew it was bad. And of course, the Jap jumped on Pearl Harbor, and that started the whole shebang. You know.
Now, did you go to college right after high school, or did you take some time off?
No, I went right to college.
And you went to MSU.
Yeah,
And
I started as a freshman
Mhm.
in fall of '39. I was accepted as senior ROTC cadet. You had to go through a process. They evaluated you and so on. In those days, I had a real physical fit. In ninth grade, I could do 129 push-ups. So I carried that through my whole military career.
What kind of classes did you take at
I
MSU?
had business and a minor in chemistry. I took geology, you know, a lot of things.
What was the ROTC class training kind of like?
Field artillery.
Okay.
We had we were trained, I had a battalion of, that's 12, French 75s from World War I. They were truck drawn, they had rubber tires on them, they'd been upgraded. And so when they had a parade, we'd always have these lined up, and the cadets would get up in the back of the truck and ride along like they did. And when we had to practice, dry run, of course. Disconnect the truck, open the trails up like you do, and release the mechanism to hold it in traveling position. Open the breech, put in a dummy shell, all by the orders, and that was part of it. But the most important part was the fact that we had in Michigan State, I wouldn't call them sand tables because they weren't sand, they were actually a platform just about eye level, and they had kind of a fiber, maybe it was glass, I don't know, a screen on top. And then they had little humps and looked like landscapes, see, on top. But you'd sit here and the guns are over here, theoretically, and you're here as an observer. You have to conduct fire in that toolbox over there on top of the screen. And you'd call a shot and they'd come over and blow up over here. They'd puff of smoke up through the screen over here. When there was so much left, you'd say, you sense it so many yards left. Then the guns would then move to the right. When beyond the target, then you have to move it left so many yards. When you're right on, when you bracket the target, then you'll fire for effect. That's what you did in actual practice. But you did it on this screen, that's what you're pretty good at. Because where you are, depending on how you measure the distance. And we had a wonderful captain of artillery, Captain Patton. I know what happened to him, he probably dead by now, but he was a great guy, and we had a big, fat sergeant who was good in artillery. And we also had pistol practice, 45 in the basement of the demonstration hall. That's a military building.
Mm-hmm.
We all qualified to the 45s. That was a pistol. That's the only live ammunition we had until we got into training in infantry in Camp McCoy. And of course we went to Camp Gordon. Then we were in it clear up to our ears, of course.
When you were taking your college courses and training with this, did you know that you'd probably be sent to Europe eventually, or?
Go someplace in the war.
Okay.
All we knew was, you see, by 43, things were, die was cast. We were in the war. So we all worked at it.
Okay, and then you graduated from college?
43.
43, and then you said you started going through infantry training?
Well, they took the whole class, artillery,
Mm-hmm.
to Camp McCoy. They gave us basic infantry. In 5 weeks, they taught us what they normally teach infantrymen in 13 weeks,
Okay,
because we'd had some training.
Right.
We knew how to march and that kind of stuff. So we had 10-mile strip marches, and we had hand grenade practice with live ammunition, machine guns, BARs, and rifles, and all that stuff, you know, they qualified.
how was that different from your training in the ROTC? Was it a lot more physical, or was it harder on you?
The ROTC training wasn't particularly physical at college, but the college had, and we all took it, they had 5 hours a week, special class, 1 hour each day, of heavy work exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Work. And you learn boxing, wrestling, running, and in the spring of the year, you know, the Grand River, the Red Cedar River runs through the campus. It's about 20 feet away. In the spring of the year, they had all of us go into the demonstration hall, which is their physical facility, and you run around the track twice to get warmed up. Then they give you a vest of 40-pound weight, 20 in front, 20 in rear, and you strap that on, and you go out and you run up and down the bleachers in the stadium,
Mm-hmm.
8 or 10 times, all the way up, all the way down. Then you come out and you run across the fields to the Red Cedar River in a big hawser about 3 inches diameter from between 2 trees. You jump and grab that, and you go across hand over hand and drop it. When you all get across, you come back the same way, come back to the field house, drop your pack off your back, and you run around a couple times to cool down, get a shower, and go back to work.
Okay.
So we're in good shape
Yeah.
physically. And we learned wrestling and boxing and judo and all that stuff in the wintertime. We were in good shape physically.
That's good. And then where did you go after the 5 weeks of training? You went to Oklahoma?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma is the artillery school.
Okay. And did you have classes every day then?
Oh, yeah. 12 hours a day.
12 hours
They
a day.
poured it on us. Back to class 9 or 0. When we graduated, we said to the 120 went down, 118 graduated. One died with, I've forgotten, some disease. So he didn't get it. One other fellow physically had, well, I tell you, he was in good shape physically, but he had a problem with his feet. I never saw anybody, feet stunk like that. They wouldn't give him a commission. That wouldn't be proper, you know. So he couldn't stay in the same room. Terrible. Nice guy, but nothing to do about it. Tried everything. So he didn't get it. But the other 1,818 of us got it. So then we had 10 days to go home and say goodbye and so on.
What were the classes like? What kind of classes were they?
Oh man, we had to drive 2.5-ton trucks, 3/4-ton trucks. We had to haul 105 howitzers, truck drawn, behind them. We had to actually fire them, load them and fire them. On the range, we had to go out and sense the rounds, just like we did in college and so on. And then we had to fire machine guns and stuff. So that was for artillery purposes.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to the 10th Armored Division, I got all their armor training, so I fired all their tanks and drove all their tanks. Fired the 3.5-inch diameter bazookas. Before that was only 1.5 inches. That wasn't big enough to stop these German tanks that went to 2 7/8 inches, which was roughly 3 inches. And they worked, so we had to fire those. And well, we in the division, I was one of the youngest second lieutenants, so in our battalion, that was it, because they spread us out.
Mm-hmm.
So the colonel said, I want you to run the team of infantrymen, about 40 of them, platoon, through the, well, it's an obstacle course, but it consisted of cross-country. You take a map, and every day was different. And so we'd follow the map, the compass, we'd go through the woods and over, wade through streams, and the last thing we'd go underneath these machine guns or fire right overhead, live ammunition. So you get used to the idea, keep your rear end down and keep moving. So that was part of that. Well, my platoon came in first 2 or 3 times. And the 4th time it came in 15th, and the colonel says, what happened to you? Well, I said, well, what happened to me was we're running along the street, or the road, and the biggest fellow infantryman, or artilleryman I should say, he was a big, broad-shouldered guy, he was 200-pounder, good physical shape. He was a kind of a backfield for a football team, you know, real rugged. He'd fallen out. The sergeant can run up and say, hey, Lieutenant, he's fallen out. I said, okay, so 5 minutes out, we stopped, and went back, we laying in the grass under a tree. White as sheet. What's the matter with you? I got a sighting. Where did it hurt? Right about here. So I took my finger like this, I put this through his clothes, on his belly button, this on his, and I punched with this finger right where his appendix was, and he jumped. And I said, well, did you have a BM that was rather loose this morning? He said, yes. I asked him what he ate and so on. He told him very ordinary food. I said, well, Sergeant, you get the ambulance. This guy's got an appendix attacked, I think. I'm not an expert, but I think that's what it is. So we waited till the ambulance came. That's why I was 15th. So I told the colonel that, and he was satisfied. So I looked after my men.
Good. Then, do you remember the exact date that you left to go to Europe?
Yeah, that was an interesting, I told about this book. It got us, well, first of all, we went to a fort outside of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a physical. And all of us had our clothes under our arm. All we had on our shoes. We're going through the line, taking physical shots overseas. And there was hundreds of men in these lines. They just, our division is 20,000. There's lots of men. And we come to the nurses and the doctors. They were stopping us and they're laughing. And they're, what's so funny, Well, they said, Gypsy Rose Lee was going through just ahead of you. You had their physical. So we tried to hush, hurry up and catch him. We never did. Little humor. Anyway, that was Camp Shanks in New York City. The next morning, we were taken before daylight by truck down to the Pier 20, Navy Pier 20 in the harbor. And the boat is a huge boat. It's a big German boat captured and taken as prize of war after World War I. Big old tub, reciprocating engines. And they took the whole doggone division up these stairs, 4 or 5 flights up, and then you get in the boat, you go 4 or 5 flights down, and you got a bunk. Everybody's got a bunk that far apart, stacked like that. So you stack your duffel at the end of it, duffel bag, your rifle and stuff, and you get in your bunk, and that's it. It took all day to load that thing, that many men.
Was it all 20,000, or was it, no?
Well, most of them. There was
Yeah,
about
that's a lot.
12,000 in that group.
Okay.
There was another boat with some more that going ahead.
Do you remember the name of the boat, the ship?
It used to be the Bismarck, kind of German, but I don't know what it is now.
Okay.
I got it in the book.
And you travel in a convoy when you went
Well,
across?
that's the part of the problem. We started out after dark that night.
Uh-huh.
You could hear the engines troop. Of course, the blackout, you couldn't see anything. So we all went to bed, nothing else to do. You couldn't play games or anything, there was no room. And you couldn't go on deck, you weren't allowed. And there's a schedule, so you had an hour a day to go on deck with you, and you come back, they rotated to get a little fresh air. But we never got out of the harbor because the Empress of Britain came in at night. We had missed them. We went too far to the right, ran aground. So here it was midnight or something. I wake up and the engines weren't running, and I hear some banging around and upstairs on the deck, chain rattling and stuff. What's going on? So I lifted the lockout curtain and looked out, and there's a Statue of Liberty right beside the boat. And oh boy, we're in trouble now. So the whole thing, all that morning, they tried tugs and everything, full speed ahead and back, try to get that off. Nothing to do but unload the boat. So we get over the side, all our gear on our back, climb down the nets, get into harbor boats, which, well, they were actually boats they used to go across the harbor, you know, for civilians. And they had a bunch of those. They climbed in those, fill up. But they only went halfway across the harbor. And a different union had that charge of the harbor, so we had to change boats, believe it or not, wartime. That was great. I went back by bus to the same dock, and this time they had a tall, thin, narrow boat. The same number of people in it, but it was a smaller boat. And it was built for the trade to go from New York to Rio de Janeiro, peacetime, high speed, you know, big boat. It wasn't as big, but it was fast. And they bunched us all on that boat. So we came out of the harbor, okay. We missed our convoy, 24 hours, and they were gone. We didn't catch them until we got to Land's End, which is outside of England. And we saw this square, all these convoy boats in convoy, and the naval vessels going in and out, airplanes overhead watching for submarines and stuff. So we went all the way across. We had a little excitement partway across. Somebody thought they saw a periscope. So they had on the top deck 2 naval gunners with 5-inch guns. So we're shooting at this thing. They blew it out of the water. What it was a wooden box floating on the waves. It broke the waves, looked like a periscope, see? So we were much relieved at that. We got over there without it.
How long did it take to get to Europe?
Well, I don't remember, probably 4 days.
4 days? That's not too bad. It was a
Well,
pretty quick boat.
you know, it was a fast boat. So
Yeah.
if it had been the old tug, it would take us 6 days or 5.
Okay. Is there a lot of people that got sick on the way, or
Not that I remember.
no? Any bad storms?
No,
Oh, that's good.
we were lucky that way.
And then when you saw the convoy, you said you were near Land's End? Okay, and then where did you get off in Europe?
Well, we didn't get off there. They sent an Englishman over on a patrol boat, and he was a pilot, a guide, to take us through the minefields over to, oh boy, Cherbourg.
Okay.
Landed in Cherbourg. And the harbor was mine. So we had to stop outside the harbor, drop anchor, and went over the side and get on these ropes, get down to the tugs. The tugs had a barge fastened to them. These wooden barges were big. And they used the barges to take us into the shore. And you get all these guys stacking on this, you know, all their equipment and everything, standing on these barges, and they're moving along in the harbor. And the reason they did it is the Germans had mined the harbor with floating mines, and mines that were attached to chains that came up 3-4 feet every so many hours. And so the Americans had actually wooden mine sweepers, and they swept that harbor clean every day for a year before they got them all out of there.
Wow.
That's why they didn't bring the big ships in. They started to once and then sunk once. So that's why we got into shore. But we got to shore, and the dock area and the whole area was blown to bits. Naval and aircraft bombing and shelling. So we climbed over these broken, jagged rocks and stuff to get up on the shore. We marched inland. By this time it was about, well, in those days, 5 o'clock or 17 hours was dark at night, dusk, getting toward its fall. So it was actually August, but it was dark, overcast. And it rained all the time in Cherbourg, the sticks and the ocean, you know. So we marched inland about a mile or two and went into one of these hedgerow fields. And in the dark, we set up, pitched our tents, 2-man tents. Next morning, we got up and looked up, and they were strategically located between 2 cow pies.
Nice.
It's a cow pasture. The cows on the other end look at us. Who are these strange people with our cow pasture? So that's where we started. And then we unloaded all the supplies and tanks and took all the gasoline off and got ready to go, and we're putting Patton's army And General Morris was very bright. He graduated in 1911 from West Point, same time Patton had. But Patton took 5 years to go through for a 4-year class because Patton couldn't get the math down. But he was such a good leader that they kept him 5th year, which I never heard of before, but he did. I'm glad he did. He's the only really good field general we had here. And people argue with that, but anyway. He had some eccentric habits, but I always got along. I met him a couple times. Took him around the battlefield. But the whole thing about it is Morris was smart. John Morris was smart. He said every Jeep has to have a machine gun, a 30 caliber machine gun. And Patton had issued an order that anybody in his division, or his army I should say, had to have no windshields up and no tops on the vehicles. Rain, snow, to make it difference, that was it. And so Patton, General Morris said, okay, because the Germans would string steel wires between 2 trees, you go down the road and cut your head off and have something to catch it. They took somewhere they got them. I guess it was some broken down warehouses or someplace bombed. Angle iron. They made it 6 feet piece with a hook on the top and sharpened it and fastened the front bumper. Every Jeep, 3/4 ton, half track, an Armored and 2.5 ton truck had that to catch these wires, so cut it wouldn't hurt anybody. The other thing they did in our division, nobody else did it, took armor plate, they took the seats out, and you put armor plate from the dash up over back like this, reinstalled the seats, and in the back, between 2 seats, they had a 2.5 inch or 2 inch pipe they welded to the stain of this floor. 42 inches high, they had a 30 caliber machine gun on top with a quick release. So every machine gun, every Jeep had a machine gun on it, which the rest of them didn't have, see. And this is the kind of stuff that our division was way ahead of everybody else because we had this. So.
And where did you go after you realized you were in a cow pasture?
Oh, then we went and battled, just a day or two, we got our equipment, away we went. It takes time to load tanks, you can't get off. And they're cosmoline, because they go over the salt water, they have to be protected. And same with your machine guns and mortars and all kinds of stuff, artillery. In the artillery in an armored division, 105 howitzers, but mounted on a tank chassis. And you got 6 howitzers with a battery instead of 4. And each one of these howitzers has a 50 caliber machine gun for air or ground. So you get a lot of firepower and mobility, a lot more than artillery does and is attached to the infantry divisions.
So what areas did you travel to while you were in?
Well, we went towards Paris roughly, and we got to Paris. They made us stop and let the French come in and take the glory of taking Paris, of course, which was de Gaulle, actually. And I have my opinions of him too, but not good. But actually, the French army didn't do much to take Paris. They did some, but
Yeah.
the underground did most. The people who lived there, they knew every foxhole and sewer opening and everything. They just took advantage of it. And essentially, they did do away with the Germans. And of course, the general in charge of the Germans there, Hitler said, "Is Paris burning?" And he said, "Yes." Well, it wasn't. But he liked Paris, and he couldn't see any point in burning it down, so he just surrendered.
What was it like for you traveling there to see, was there like a lot of destruction?
Yeah. If we got to a place, no matter where it was, if we got fire coming from that town or that section, we just blow it apart. Nothing left, especially in Germany. And all those houses are all stone. They used them as forts.
Okay.
And it didn't last long because we either killed them with direct fire or we blew the structure down and it collapsed on them, and that was the end of them. You know?
Did you ever work along with civilians in France? Get to know any of the people there?
Well, we weren't in one place long enough to really get to know them, but we did. Our S2, our intelligence group, worked with the French underground, yeah.
Okay.
And the Polish underground and every underground you think of, Norwegian and so on. Wherever we happened to run into them, they could help us and we could help them. So mostly the French, because we were in that area more than any others. There weren't others.
Well, what other cities did you go to in France?
Oh,
And you got Alsace.
one of the first areas that we captured was really hard fighting. It was Metz,
Okay.
the big city in Alsace-Lorraine. And Alsace-Lorraine has the unfortunate circumstance of being one century or one generation French and one generation German, but not with the war, back and forth. So World War 1870, the Germans had it. 1914, the French had it. The Germans came back in 39, and now it's, back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So the poor people in that area spoke both German and French.
Uh-huh.
And you could talk to them in either language, they understood it. But they had after our division had cleared out Metz and the area around it, and given it back to France, essentially, de Gaulle came and they had a big reception in the city hall. And we were introduced to him. I met him. Great big guy, with a big nose, little beady eyes, and shake hands like it's dead fish. Just no personality at all.
After France then, did you go on to Germany?
Oh yeah,
or-
we were the first division, American division, to get into Germany. In fact,
Okay.
we fought the Battle of the Bulge. We were in the Battle of the Bulge. There's complete detail of that.
Mhm.
That's a long story, but Patton knew 2 weeks ahead of time. He figured the Germans were going to attack there. They told the rest of the generals, Eisenhower, they wouldn't believe, oh, they're out, they're all done, We're home by Christmas, the idea was, it wasn't. And Patton was smart, so when the Battle of the Bulge started, they realized it was a major offense. They hit the 28th Infantry Division. They collapsed because their kids never been in combat. They just simply left, and they left a big hole in the front, up in the northern part of it, where the 6th German Army hit. 6th Germany, 5th Germany, this is the 8th German Army, 7th down there. So, when this battle apparently was going to be intensive, very expansive by the Germans, Eisenhower called all the generals together, and he started out Montgomery, and Montgomery said, well, we can't think we have more brickbats piled up. Next was General Simpson. He had the new army, only 2 divisions in it. The idea was to bring new divisions in from America as fast as he could, build up to 5 or 6. So they have 150,000 men. He only had 2 divisions. That's about 40,000 men, 35,000. Next was the First Army. He had 160,000. The 28th Division was part of his army. That's the one that fell apart. Then the Third Army, they're 175,000. They didn't fall apart. And the 7th Army down here was Patch. He was an infantry officer. He didn't know anything about armor. And you had the French Army way down here, which didn't amount to much, under de Gaulle. So all these generals, Ike says, what can you do? He was down the line, he gets to Patton, says, I'll have them attacking in 1 hour. What? Yes, 1 hour. How do you figure that? Well, he said, I figured this is going to be a meeting for this purpose. He said, I told my staff to plan A, attack east through the Sarre-Moselle area, the Alsace-Lorraine area. That's plan A. Plan B was to go through the switch position of the Siegfried Line, which our division had started in, and hadn't got too far, we just started. The third, plan C, would be to take the whole 10th Armored Division and head it north up to Bastogne. All I can do is get the radio and say, plan A, boom, or whatever it is, and they moved. That's what he did. Eisenhower was amazed. He did it.
So what was that battle like for you?
Oh, that was rough.
It's rough.
Lost a lot of men, but we killed a lot of Germans.
Uh-huh.
In fact, we were there 24 hours before the 101st ever showed up.
Mhm.
They got all the credit because they were the bigger unit than ours, or they were in that area bigger. And so they always talk about the 101st, but actually they wouldn't last 5 minutes if we hadn't none of their armor, and we wouldn't last 5 minutes if we didn't have infantry. So between the two, they made a tough combination. And of course, that's only 1/3 of our division. That's combat B, 1/3 of it. A and reserve are down here in Luxembourg. And that's an interesting story because the 5th Armored Infantry Division, which has been the Hurtigan Force, has lost 50% of their manpower. and blown out all the tubes of their cannon because they fired them direct like they did in World War I, rather than over like this. And the reason they fired them direct is because they were coming through the woods. It's a wooded area. You couldn't fire them up like this and come down and hit your own men. You see them coming through the woods, you fire this way, straight at them. So they had won that battle, fortunately, because, and the reason they had to win it was because whoever controlled Herdingen Forest controlled the dams, and if we controlled them, we could keep the water where it should be. The German code, they'd open the sluice gates and they'd flood the whole area. The Army can't operate in water, a foot deep, see. So we won that one. But the 5th Infantry Division did all the hard work of that one. The 32nd came in, they had a little action, but not much. They didn't do much with them. But they put the 5th Infantry Division on the 40-mile front, supposed to be a quiet front, Luxembourg, facing Germany. And the border between Luxembourg and Germany was 4 miles of dense woods and forest. And they'd grown up that way for years. Nobody, no roads through it, no railroads, nothing, no paths. So the Germans decided they were going to come down through there with 3 infantry divisions. Mm-hmm. One was a ski division, one of their expert groups. And they had to hack their way through with machetes and axes and stuff, get through the brush. They couldn't bring anything except what they carried their back, mortars, machine guns, that's all. So they came down and they assaulted the 5th Infantry Division. Now they were smart, they'd been in the woods and the Herdingen Forest, so they were out in the open area, 200-300 yards from the woods, see, out in the farm area. It was level, you can see, and they had good field of fire. But their defenses were so thin in 40 miles, what they did, they had about 6,000 men, all they had left, or so in the division. So they take a third of them, they put them on line. Well, that means you got a machine gunner here, 2 guys, infantry, walking to the next machine gun, that's 300 yards away, and then so on, for 40 miles. Mm. No depth, see. Their artillery was all shot up, so they sent it back to ordnance to have it retubed. They hadn't got it back yet. So the Germans were coming through these infantry divisions through against this thin frontier. Well, the general of the 5th Infantry Division would have 6,000 men, or 2,000 men on the line, and 2,000 resting, 2,000 repairing equipment. They rotate every 8 hours. So what he did was, he called all of them up the front. Well, that still didn't give him much to fight with, so our division came up, Combat Command A and Reserve, which is 6,500 men, tanks and everything else, and our division artillery. And we blasted these guys coming through the woods, the Germans. And for 2 weeks we're cleaning these draws out in these woods, and he's coming through there. Hand-to-hand fighting, a lot of it. Mm-hmm. It was rough, but that's 2/3 of it. The other third was up in Bastogne, Combat Command B. And one of our Armored Artillery Battalions went up there with him. So that's the main thing. Mm-hmm. But we're stretched pretty thin, see. And the 5th wouldn't last in 5 minutes. So the reason they were coming down is south of Luxembourg, the main road, there was 5 or 6 bridges. And they're not over water, they're over faults or openings in the ground, you know, caverns or whatever, open ground. Not caverns, but they're gullies, deep gullies. Okay. They're maybe 50, 60 feet across, 40, 50 feet deep. Because it's an area that was created, Luxembourg City, and that area was created by volcanic action over the centuries. And so they built these nice bridges over it, the main road. The Germans could have cut those bridges so Patton couldn't come up and attack their flanks, see? But we stopped them. We were called the Ghost Division because all of the division had to take all their insignia off their vehicles. So nobody knew who they were. All our insignia shoulder patches were off before we went into that, in the Bastogne area. So we were called the Ghost Division by the Germans because they were down here, and the next morning we were up here fighting in Luxembourg, see? And that's a little background.
How long were you in that area of Luxembourg?
Oh, well, the Battle of Bulge lasted about 4 or 5 weeks, roughly. Mm-hmm. We were there most of that time, mostly constant fighting, day and night.
And what did you do after that?
Well, after that, our division went across Germany, and it's a long ways across Germany.
Yeah.
Well, we got across to the Rhine River, and captured a bridge intact and went across and wound up in Garmisch-Partenkirchen down on the Bavaria, not the Bavaria, but the Bavarian and Austrian frontier.
Okay. Where were you then at the time of the end of the war?
Down in Bavaria.
In Bavaria?
Garmisch-Partenkirchen, the town.
Okay.
There's an interesting story about that. As we came down the road towards Garmisch, we were stopped by an international Red Cross person, man, and a German captain with a white flag. And they wanted us to agree not to shoot up Garmisch-Partenkirchen. We said, well, okay, if you fire one round, we'll destroy the town. If you don't fire anything, we won't do anything. Well, they kept their promise, we kept ours, and we went in. It's a wonderful place to end the war because it's a recreation area. And it had lakes, and you go up the Zugspitze mountain on the Cog Railroad, come into the hotel, snow on the ground up there, it's a high elevation, you ski. They had a lot of German cavalry officers, horses, I mean, and you could ride that, I mean, all kinds of things. We wound up there end of May, 1st of June, beautiful weather.
Mm-hmm. Now you said after the end of the war, then you remained in Europe, working with, what was his name?
General Morris.
General Morris.
Commanding General of the 10th Armored, and he would, as soon as the war ended in Germany, VE Day, he was made Corps Commander, promoted. He took me to Corps.
Now then, when you were there, were you then part of the Army of Occupation?
Oh yeah. Sure.
Okay. Did you ever think that you might get sent to the Pacific, or you thought you knew you'd remain in Europe?
Well, that's an interesting question, because if you had 50 points, you went home.
Mm-hmm.
I had 49 points.
Okay.
At that point. And so there was lots of officers, enlisted men that had 25 points maybe, or whatever, short of the 50, quite a lot. And they were taken out of infantry units and put in separate units. They disbanded the armored divisions, took that infantry in infantry divisions. And armor was then relegated mostly to patrolling Germany, what few there were left. And the units, artillery, they put in artillery units. And the whole thing was they were going to go over and fight the Japs. That was the idea. So before we got very far in that direction, they dropped the bombs in the war in the Pacific.
I'm going to... Okay, so we left off. You said you started working with General Morris. What was your objective when you took on this new job?
I had no idea what.
You had no idea what you were getting into?
Totally lost. And I had more scared as a general than I was the Germans. I had no idea what a general was supposed to do or did do. But the first day of combat, they took me out and they were getting shell bursts overhead, artillery shell bursts. I said, Lieutenant, what size artillery is that? I looked at it and I said, well, I don't know, but it could be 75 or it could be 88s. I can't tell by the size of the explosion or the puff of black smoke or whatever shell what it is. In other words, he's trying to find out if I tell him the truth, not doctor him up or tell him something wasn't true. So from then on, he trusted me.
Okay.
So the story that worked out, he was 60 years old when he was given command of the 10th Armored Division. And no 60-year-old man can function leading an armored division because it's different than infantry. Infantry, you have lines of men on the ground and they move. Say you got a platoon and there's 4 squads. First and third squad lay down and they fire their rifles. That's called suppressing fire against the enemy.
Okay.
Second and fourth squad run ahead of them 20 feet, drop down, and they lay down suppressing fire, and the first and third leapfrog. That's where they get to the objective. And you lose a lot of men because they're out in the open and shells. Armor doesn't work that way at all. We pass our armor division through an infantry division, through the front. Now we're completely in German territory, in the blue. And you may be surrounded by Germans at times, but you've got a lot of firepower and mobility. And so you move. The general's idea was supposed to be there to see where there was a weakness in the enemy's operation and direct our strength to it, to beat them. We had some very fine officers, senior officers in the division. There was 2 or 3 professional officers like General Morris, but the rest of them were all ROTC like myself, and they were top guys, every one of them. And so they were able to do a lot without, because they knew what they had to do. They had their orders. I had their orders. I'm not supposed to, I'm a staff officer, I can't say anything. If I see somebody doing something that's wrong, I can't do anything about it. I do have to report to general what I see and what happens, who's doing what. I had to report shortage of ammunition, food, clean socks, all this kind of stuff. And whether or not their orders were being followed by the other commanders below him. But I can't say anything to the commanders, That's why I got the job. The aide that had the job before was telling he was a captain, he was telling these colonels and brigadier generals what to do. That's not his job. They had it up to here with him and they booted him out. So I learned from his, what not to do. So.
And you spent most of that time in the area of Bavaria in Germany?
Oh no, we moved across all of Europe.
Okay.
And we didn't stay in any one place very long, other than the Battle of the Bulge. That was kind of a confined area, but it would move slowly at times.
And then, so from this time, this period of the war ending and then working kind of in this army of occupation, how long did you continue to remain in Europe? Traveling all over?
We were in Europe until General Morris was ordered back to this country. And he took me back with him, and that's kind of interesting. He would report to the Chief of Staff, Marshal. You see, before he'd given the division, this goes way back, remember Rommel was running across North Africa, beating the British and everybody else.
Okay.
Desert Fox, they call him. And so General Marshall said, I got to have an outfit that will defeat this guy. So he had Morris appointed as a special corps commander with the idea of training troops to defeat Rommel. So he had them trained, ready to go, the whole shebang, and all of a sudden North Africa Corps surrendered, they were done. So they need them. So Morris saw that and he said to Marshall, he said, relieve me from this job, because it's going nowhere. Give me the 1st Armored Division going overseas that's available. Well, in the meantime, there was some time lag in between time. And he was then sent by General Marshall to Italy, Sicily, and various places as a War Department observer. He'd observe what's going on the ground, go back, report to the Chief of Staff. So he filled that time in with his activities. So lots of experience. And so then when the 10th Armored was available, General Newgarden was the original commander. He was killed in an aircraft accident coming back from Washington, D.C. with the orders for us to go overseas, our division. He and the Chief of Staff and the pilot, this little plane, ran inside of a mountain in a rainstorm. That was it. So General Morris had given the division about 3 or 4 weeks before we went overseas. So nobody really knew General Morris, but they knew Newgarden. But we'd all been well trained, so we just, So that's the background of that part.
When was it then that you got back to the United States?
I got back around November or December, I don't remember exactly. Must have been 1st of December.
And how long was the process that it took before you actually got to go back home?
Well, I had 1 point to earn, so they put me in the Pentagon for a week or 2. I got the extra point, then they sent me home.
What did you do in the Pentagon?
Well, just paperwork. Didn't want
Okay.
much,
And then when you got home, did you just go right out and look for a job or just take some time
Oh,
off?
yeah. Oh, I went out. In fact, I went back to college and took some graduate courses
Oh,
in chemistry and various things. And I got a job with the Farm Bureau Fruit Products Company, which is a cooperative owned by farmers. They had 3 plants in Michigan, and they froze and canned foods. And then I heard about this job, well, it's a long story. I was injured in a plant accident in one of the plants in Bay City. I nearly lost my life in that one. Going through combat, and all of a sudden, you know, that's a whole story by itself. Anyway, I broke my leg. And I didn't realize it broke. It was just a small femur. I know it was sore and it swelled up, and they sent me to the company doctor, who was a kind of a poor doctor. And he took an x-ray vertically and this way, but didn't take it this way. Didn't see the crack. It just cracked. So I worked on that 2 days. It swelled up. I couldn't get my trousers off. Painful. And the third day, I should have known better, because I knew what shock was. The third day, I was suffering shock so much, felt like I had the flu, couldn't move. So I had to walk in, sit down in the office, and I gotta get somebody to take this job, I can't do it, physically. So I went home, recuperated, and then I heard there was a job in Muskegon teaching business college, so I came up, got the job, I taught that for a couple of years, and then I went to work for Lakeshore Machinery. Stayed there 30 years, retired.
Okay. And how did you come about writing this book here?
Well, got married, of course, after I got home. Met my wife, married her. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, and I'd walk the floor. Memories of the war, you know. And I couldn't sleep, so finally I decided, well, I was going to have a national convention, maybe I'll go to it. So I went to it, and here these guys were all talking about their war experience. So I started sharing mine. Then I got it out of my system, so I could go to sleep, no bother me. So I got thinking about it, you know, there isn't a book about our division that's really good. So I sat down and I wrote this thing. It took about 4 or 5 years, research. So. And my wife typed it, and did a great job. And I designed the cover myself. I thought that was a pretty good cover for Tiger division. So that's the story of the book.
Okay. Let's see, so since what year did you retire then?
85 I retired, 95 I wrote published the book, I should say. I worked on it from 85 to 95.
Do you go to any reunions or anything like that in your?
We used to. Last year was the last time we had a national reunion. They closed it down because it get too old.
Okay.
And if you realize the amount of work involved in national reunion,
yeah,
guys can't do it anymore. You know, they get too old. And then none of that, but you have different tours, and they sign up for it ahead of time, and then the last minute they call up and say, well, my wife's sick, or I've got the flu, or a broken leg, or a heart attack, I can't come.
right.
Then you gotta make all the changes, and that's a lot of work. And all fell on 2 or 3 individuals, as usual.
So you're done with those.
Yep.
Did you do anything with the 50th reunion?
The last one?
When was the 50th? I just know that there was a reunion and everyone went to Europe and kind of just toured around the area. No?
That was, well, not everyone went to Europe. I could have, but I didn't. It was over Christmas holiday, or 1st of December. Well, actually, they were over there the 16th of December, 1940, last year. Because 16th December was the day of the Battle of Ulster. So they were in Bastogne and in Luxembourg. And the people there put on a great welcome for them. And we had 2 or 3 fellows from our division went over, represented us. And I could have gone over, but I thought, well, that's a lot of money, I guess not. Now I wished I had, because they took us through all kinds of things that I'd like to see. And of course, we've been over a couple, 3 times after the war, my wife and I have.
Okay.
We were at the Ham Cemetery, which is outside Luxembourg City, where Patton's buried, and where 5,000 of our men are buried, our division. Very emotional. But, so that's about it.
Okay. Do you have any other stories that are kind of hanging in your memory that you'd like to talk
Well,
about?
this book is full of them, but I haven't got time to tell you.
Okay. Well, I don't have any more questions if you think you're done.
No.
We good? Okay.